Hi, my name's James Griffiths, welcome back to the channel, and a bit of a themed video today. I was listening to this record, and this is the Rolling Stones' Let It Bleed, and I was doing a comparison. I've recently picked up an 80s digital repress of it, I think. It's from the 80s. So I was going back between that one and this one, which is an original British pressing from the 60s, trying to work out which sounded better. A totally agonising exercise, but the more I listened to the song, the more my ear was tuning into the amazing performance of Mary Clayton, the gospel soul singer who was drafted in at short notice to perform the amazing backing vocals on this song. She was heavily pregnant when she did the session. Just one of those incredible moments of synchronicity, really, and what an extraordinary contribution she made to that song. Really, really spine-tingling. Would have been a great song anyway, but with her contribution it really elevates it. And that immediately got me thinking straight away of other really amazing guest performances on people's records. You know, I mean, it's not an uncommon thing in rock and pop music for guest appearances to happen, but I wanted to try and confine this to what I consider to be really top draw ones. You know, guest appearances where the song would have been much less special without it. So I got my thinking cap on. The first one that sprang to mind, actually, because I was still thinking of female singers. I wasn't able to do a full list of female singers, unfortunately, but this one did spring to mind almost immediately. And from Led Zeppelin 4 on the Battle of Evermore, third track, side 1, you have the absolutely hair-raising vocal performance of Denny, which I still sometimes wonder when I listen to this record whether that maybe is my favourite track on the record. I mean, it's certainly not as played out as Stairway to Heaven, but she certainly gives that performance a real run for its money, and the way that her vocals blend with Robert Plant's really gives the song a truly epic air, really. Just amazing. This one immediately sprung to mind, Let It Be, and Billy Preston, who of course played the electric piano on Get Back, and he played on the Rooftop Concert, of course, brought in by George Harrison in an attempt to pour oil on troubled waters, I think. Billy had been a friend of the band back in the Hamburg days. He came in, played the electric piano, which hadn't really been a part of the Beatles' sound at all, beyond, you know, I mean, John played a bit at Shea Stadium, I suppose, but it had never really been a part of their sound. And I think you can see in the Peter Jackson documentary, you can see the mood lift when he comes in, and when he starts to play the piano, you can see the Beatles getting visibly excited at this extra strand to their sound. And I do think his solo on Get Back is it's a real hair-raising moment, really. It's incredibly well crafted. Don't know if it was improvised or not, or it's more likely, I suppose, that it was arrived at after rehearsal, so he knew what he was going to play. But it's a very incisive solo, and it really characterises that track, and it's difficult to imagine Get Back without it, I suppose. So, staying on the Beatles theme, I thought of this one as well. This is John Lennon and Imagine. Now, John had many guest appearances by various people over the years. He used Ringo a lot, and you know, he had all kinds of people. Elton John, of course, turns up on Walls and Bridges. But on Imagine, he has George Harrison on a couple of tracks, and I think on How Do You Sleep in particular, George's slide solo is really aggressive, angry sounding. It seems to be the icing on the cake of that track. The lyric has a very biting and acerbic quality to it, and George just really served up the goods, really, which was a great moment, I think, for him, because I don't think George had ever counted himself as a superlative soloist. He struggled in the studio to come up with solos. It would take him a long time, but that one has the air of being improvised, and just the way he hits the notes at just the right moment and shapes the phrases. It's just a great moment in that song. And then staying with George again, he had many guest appearances on his albums over the years. He did have a tendency to fall back on the same people and to use his friends a lot. On the eponymous album from 1979, there's a great guest appearance from Steve Winwood throughout that album, actually playing some glorious synthesizer and keyboard stuff. The guest appearance I wanted to highlight on this was his old friend Eric Clapton, who turns in a wonderful piece of guitar playing on the opening track, I'd Have You Anytime, which was the Bob Dylan co-write. Lovely, warm, mellow way to open the album. and Eric just plays some gorgeous guitar in that track. It's impossible to imagine the song without it. Eric did many good things over the years for lots of different people. I also love the solo he plays on George's Cloud 9 album as well, on That's What It Takes, which I think is just a piece de resistance. And then Ringo, couldn't leave Ringo out because he also guested on so many records over the years. I think because his friends all knew what a great player he was, and he became quite a sought-after musician. And this is one that maybe goes under the radar a little bit. This is the first album by Stephen Stills, and Ringo has a guest appearance on this, playing drums on the track To a Flame on side 2. This is just a great example of Ringo's good taste and his sensitivity, just knowing exactly what to play. A very simple part, he's just keeping time, 2 and 4 on the drums, but to my ears he sounds like he's using timpani mallets in order to play this lovely rolling figure around the toms, and it's very spectral sounding. The song has got xylophones in it anyway, so it has a slightly floaty, ghostly kind of vibe to it. But Ringo, he doesn't really sound like Ringo. I think it's a great example of how adaptable he could be, and just, as I said, doing exactly the right thing at exactly the right time. Bob Dylan. Wanted to quickly talk about Mark Knopfler, who does some great guitar on this record, Slow Train Coming. He's also on Infidels, of course, along with Mick Taylor, who plays some great stuff on that album as well. Mark Knopfler, he ended up playing with Dylan quite early in his career. I don't think Dire Straits had done more than maybe one album at this point, 1 or 2 albums at the most. Dylan had heard him playing, liked his style, got him in to play on Slow Train Coming, and he went on tour with Bob as well, of course. And Mark Knopfler's guitar playing is all over this record. It's far more than just a guest guitarist. The sound of the record is based around a couple of things, really. You've got the producer Jerry Wexler on here, so you've got that horn sound, that very distinctive horn sound. But Mark Knopfler's guitar playing shines through on every song. Not everybody is a fan of Mark Knopfler, and I get that. His playing is very precise. It's got that very kind of whitewashed, clean kind of quality, but he could play really well, and he certainly does some great stuff on this record, on Slow Train Coming. When I first heard this, I didn't know he was on the album, and as soon as the stylus hit the record, I immediately thought, oh, there's Mark Knopfler, incredibly identifiable sound. Only has to play one note, really, and it's him. We're going to take a little detour into jazz now, and this is what I wanted to feature. This is the Rolling Stones and Tattoo You. And this album features a guest appearance by the great jazz saxophonist Sonny Rollins. The track I wanted to highlight was Waiting on a Friend, the closing track of the album, which just has Sonny Rollins playing this absolutely wonderful part. It's very funky, good time feel to it. Mick Jagger apparently, when he wanted to try and explain to Sonny what was required for the track, rather than trying to explain it in words, he just did a little dance in the studio to try and get Sonny into the groove or into the kind of feel that they wanted. It's a great song. Also features Michael Caraballo from Santana on congas, but I think it's Rollins really who steals the show at the end of that song. The great saxophone solo, which just seems to fade away forever on the breeze. Absolutely wonderful. This one maybe not the most spectacular example, but I did want to include it because I do think it's a bit of a highlight from the Elvis Costello album Trust. There is the great new wave duet between Elvis and Glenn Tilbrook from Squeeze on side 2 on the song From a Whisper to a Scream. And this was another example of serendipity, really. Elvis was doing a guide vocal in the studio for the musicians, I think, and he had a sore throat that day, couldn't sing very well. And Glenn Tilbrook happened to be in the studio, just as a friend. He offered to sing the backing track. He offered to sing the guide vocal for Elvis, just to help him out, really. And he sang it, and he put a huge amount of effort into it, and it was a real balls-to-the-wall performance, full of energy, full of vitality. And they all thought, wow, that's fantastic. So they left him on the track, then had Elvis, when his voice was better, he ended up singing on it as well, and they arranged it so there was a kind of call and response thing going down between Costello and Tilbrook, and it just works a treat. It's an undoubted highlight of this record. Couldn't leave this one out. This is a great example, I think, of where a musician just comes into the studio without any particular rehearsal or any particular guidance, plugs in, off he goes, here's the track for the first time, and Robert Fripp just essentially just nails it. Comes down to the studio in Berlin, was it at this point, or were they in France at this point? I can't quite remember. David Bowie always had his finger on the pulse. Robert Fripp was somebody with his own sound, Bowie was not afraid of that, was not afraid of integrating somebody else's sound into his sound. Just let him rip. The Frippatronics, I think, are a really important part of this song. Obviously there are other ingredients in the mix as well. You've got Bowie's incredible vocal performance, but that kind of churning, emotionally resonant guitar sound, which sounds quite unearthly really. It transforms the track into something, you know, more than it could have been. Just realised, talking about David Bowie, I've not pulled out Hot Space, but that's another one, isn't it? Bowie and Queen. We'll finish with this one actually, this is one of my all-time favourite guest performances from the album Soul Mining by The. You have the absolutely extraordinary piano pyrotechnics of Jules Holland, who plays on the track Uncertain Smile. Again, not quite sure of the story behind this one, how he came to be involved in it. Obviously, you know, at that time in the 80s, Jules was a big name. He was really famous. Nobody could play piano like him. Matt Johnson from The, he had a very astute and intelligent musical sensibility. He probably imagined that Jules could do something special, but it would have been great to be a fly on the wall again in the studio sessions for that particular song, because he just goes for it. Just that thing where the piano just rolls on, just getting more and more creative and more bombastic, and it just absolutely raises the roof on that track. And I think it's definitely one of the greatest recorded moments in British pop music of the 1980s, Jules Holland. So there we go, those are my suggestions. There are loads more, I'm sure, so yeah, I'm looking forward to hearing people's suggestions for that. So hope you enjoyed the video, take care, and I'll see you in the next one.